Hola amigos, welcome back to my channel. So ever since I watched the movie Titanic, it's been one of my favorite movies of all time, and I've been fascinated with the story behind the Titanic. I've watched so many podcasts, so many videos about it, and I learned about the Titan submarine that was going down to the wreckage of the Titanic through the company OceanGate. Actually, a few years ago, through a YouTuber from my home country, from Mexico, called Alex por el Mundo. That's the name of the channel. He actually went down successfully with OceanGate to see the wreckage of the Titanic, and he documented it in one of his videos, or actually a series videos. I think it's 5 videos. He actually went down. He actually tried to go down 1 year, but then they canceled the trip because there were some issues. Surprisingly, Stockton Rush canceled the trip down under, and then 1 year later he was invited again to try for a second time, and then they successfully went down. You can watch the videos there on YouTube, and they're actually really interesting to watch. Of course, now it's bittersweet to watch them now that we know what actually happened a few years ago with the implosion of the Titanic. But recently I also watched this documentary on Netflix about everything that was going on behind the doors with OceanGate, and we have a video today called 10 Shocking Revelations from Titan, the OceanGate Submersible Disaster Netflix documentary. It's not the whole Netflix documentary, just a video that I found, and I'm gonna try to say some things if I remember anything that is not being mentioned here. But I definitely recommend you watching the Netflix documentary. You really get to see the mind behind Stockton, and then you actually start to question if this was an accident or murder. I think it was the latter, but that's for you to decide as well. Anyway, let's watch this video and see what we have. Let's go.
The porosity, you can see the delaminations, you can see all the voids.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're looking at the most shocking and disturbing pieces of information revealed in Titan, the OceanGate submersible disaster, on Netflix.
With 100% certainty, that sub could not go freezing. It's critical to keep the water out.
Yeah, what he's mentioning here, maybe they're gonna touch on it a bit more later, but what they're mentioning here is that Stockton didn't want to send the submersible to the US or Canada to actually store it because it was too expensive, so they left it out in the freezing cold. And this actually, carbon fiber, the material that the submersible was built on, carbon fiber is not very good with very low temperatures. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, that it was the trip right after taking it out from the freezing cold. I think it was a trip right after that made the submersible implode. So anyway,
Specialists.
We have clients that are Titanic enthusiasts, which we refer to as Titaniacs.
A lot of people have wondered how OceanGate was allowed to operate by charging people for tickets to the Titanic in an uncertified, unclassed vessel that, because of its lack of flag, was also technically unclaimed by any country.
A lot of our mission specialists are also space people. It differs in a significant way in that we actively seek the involvement of the mission specialists who come out with us.
The big loophole was, as Rob McCallum explains,
yeah, that actually pisses me off, because if you watch the documentary, the interviews with Alex por el Mundo, it's Alan. Actually, let me double check, because I'm not sure if it's Alex or Alan por el Mundo. I actually think it's Alan por el Mundo, and I've been saying it wrong. Yeah, it is Alan por el Mundo. I'm sorry. It's this guy, Alan Estrada. My bad. I really apologize. Anyway, Alan por el Mundo. Now I feel stupid. Anyway, but what Alan says in some of his interviews is that they didn't get any training at all. One of the interviewers asks him if they did any preparation, and then he jokingly says, the only preparation that we had to do before going down was to not eat beans, so that they wouldn't fart in the submarine. That was the only preparation that he went through to go down to see the wreckage of the Titanic. So the fact that they called them mission specialists pisses me off, because it's just is just to get around the laws, right? You cannot bring tourists down to the wreckage of the Titanic, so you call them mission specialists. Why are they specialists? Because they didn't eat beans.
The mission specialists. This was a piece of jargon OceanGate used to describe its paying customers, giving them jobs to do, including bolting the submersible shut and other key parts of the process, to argue that they weren't civilians and no rules were being broken.
The term mission specialist is a workaround. There are some rules about operating vessels at sea. Those rules differ depending on whether you are a crew member or you're a paying passenger.
It's chilling to hear various people describe how, from the beginning, Stockton Rush built OceanGate to avoid regulation at every turn.
Stockton was trying to confuse that, insisting that nobody was ever referred to as a passenger.
Hull tests.
Yeah, she settles down, but that's a lot of events. Okay.
As we all know by now, the problem with Titan was that its hull was made of carbon fiber, and nowhere near enough tests were done to prove that carbon fiber was going to be a reliable and resilient enough material for deep ocean exploration.
They actually did a lot of tests, but it proved that carbon fiber wasn't the material to use. So it's not that they didn't do enough tests to prove that this was the right material, it's that they just proved that it was the wrong material to use.
Yeah, some of an inflow explode. Wow. Okay.
But Netflix has
And look at his attitude. Okay, let's move on. Let's continue. Okay, whatever.
footage of the
Jesus
few
Christ,
tests
these
that
are
were
lives you're
carried out
playing
on
with,
the
brother.
smaller test versions of the hull, all of which failed catastrophically.
So the good news is we started to see evidence of failure before it happened, which is one of the test objectives.
They were working with Boeing at the time, and Boeing conducted an analysis of the failed hull and warned OceanGate outright not to do this, and that the hull just wasn't up to scratch. After this, OceanGate went totally independent, using Boeing's designs to continue on its doomed path alone.
I would say that was it.
Look at him.
Yeah, I think so.
Andrea Doria.
There's debris all around us. That's a shot right out here.
The thing about Stockton is that now hindsight is 2020, as they say. But when you listen to him talking to the mission specialists that were supposed to go down to the Titanic, or when you hear him in interviews, he just has this confidence that you're like, yeah, this man knows what he's talking about. And if you're not, there we go. So if you're not an engineer, you're like, okay, well, this makes sense. He's a visionary. He's the Elon Musk of the ocean. But now we know what happened. But if you were listening to him speak live, you'd be like, yeah, this is the man.
The SS Andrea Doria is another famous shipwreck in the North Atlantic, and is relatively popular with experienced divers and submersibles because of its shallow depth. It's only 160 feet below the surface, versus the 12,500 feet of the Titanic. Rush took Titan, then named Cyclops, for a test drive at the Andrea Doria, but even this went wrong. He insisted on piloting himself, despite David Lockridge being more experienced.
He came down, drove forward, 3 meters away from the bow. Basically, he brought us into a debris field.
He got them stuck in a debris field, and then nearly crashed the sub into the bow of the ship. It was up to Lockridge to take command and pilot the sub to safety. The incident led to a permanent falling out between Rush and Lockridge.
He brought us in.
Yeah, he fired
to
him.
the starboard side, and
This
jammed
is the guy that got
underneath
fired.
the bow. So he is jammed good and proper. I said to him, please don't do anything, just give me the controller.
David Lockridge's tests.
So Stockton said to me, okay, I want you to go out there and carry out an inspection of the Titan.
For a while, David Lockridge, a submersible pilot, was OceanGate's director of marine operations. But after the Andrea Doria incident, Lockridge was asked to conduct a full evaluation of the sub. He did as asked, carrying out many of his own tests, most of which the sub failed. and then sent a detailed report to Rush.
The goal for this document for me is the safety of anybody that goes in there, including you.
But, as discussed, Rush already wasn't happy with Lockridge and used these tests as an excuse to fire him. Netflix has recordings of the meetings in which Rush told Lockridge to leave, including some other employees pleading with Rush to keep Lockridge because his experience was invaluable.
Why test something with people in it?
Yeah.
I don't understand that. To me, it was just sheer arrogance.
Afterwards, Rush announced that the company accountant, Bonnie Carl, was going to be the new pilot. She quickly quit.
And I just remember thinking, what is happening? Like, are you nuts? I'm an accountant.
Culture of silence.
I had to make sure that nobody spoke up. I worked for somebody that is probably borderline clinical psychopath, but definitely a narcissist.
Former Director of Engineering Tony Neeson was another ex-OceanGate employee who spoke to Netflix, discussing how things changed at the company.
Yeah, when you watch the documentary, you can see that none of the people working at OceanGate would have ever stepped foot inside that submarine. The accountant, the chief inspector, nobody. Only Stockton Rush and for some reason this French guy, PH, I can't remember his name, but they just call him PH sometimes. The French guy that actually, I think he was the person that has the most trips down to the Titanic, if I'm not mistaken, around 34. It might be pretty close with James Cameron, but I think PH was the guy that held the record for it. But yeah, when you watch the documentary, you can clearly see that nobody trusted what was going on, which also makes you wonder why they wouldn't tell people, like pull them from the side and say, hey, don't do this, man. Please don't go. But I guess that would have put them in legal trouble as well, or face consequences with Rush. So yeah, it's a difficult situation. Now that we know everything that happened, you can say, oh, why didn't you do this or that? But as it's going on, it's difficult to know what to do correctly, because they might think, okay, I think this is unsafe, but Stockton is saying it's safe, so maybe I just go with it.
Company following the dismissal of Lockridge. He said that Rush told him explicitly that he was going to ruin Lockridge's life for trying to sabotage the company.
That as well. You don't want to get your life ruined, right?
For him to spend $50,000 to ruin somebody's life.
Now the collaborative atmosphere was gone, with the engineering department eventually made up almost entirely of young, inexperienced recent graduates, too afraid to tell Rush that he was wrong. Nissen himself eventually left OceanGate too, after being constantly overruled by Rush, who adamantly refused to listen to criticism of Titan.
It's culture that caused this to happen. It's culture that killed the people. 100%.
The crack.
At any point within those emails, were you made aware that a crack was identified in the hull?
During one of Titan's test drives, loud popping noises again were a cause for concern, indicating that the carbon fiber hull was getting weaker and weaker with every expedition. But at one point, a huge crack was found, which was examined and finally necessitated a new hull being made.
That was not public knowledge, and they said, do not say anything to anyone.
Tony Nissen, the engineering lead, was then chewed out by Stockton Rush for not knowing about the defect, only for Nissen to point out that he'd already warned Rush about it. Huge numbers of engineers were fired over this and replaced with people with even less experience. Nissen didn't whistleblow out of fear of ending up like David Lockridge.
I wasn't going to fight him. I wasn't going to go to the board. Because
this is why I said in the beginning that this was not an accident. This was murder from Stockton himself. I mean, he was crazy enough to put his own life in danger, to use materials that everyone in the industry has been telling him, do not do this. That's okay. You're crazy enough to risk your own life? Fine. But why bring paying customers, innocent people, and hide the fact that I bet you didn't tell them that there's 30 people very well known in the industry that are telling you not to do this. I bet you didn't say that. I bet you didn't say how many engineers have in your own company. How many engineers in your own company have told you not to do this and you fired them? I bet you didn't say that either. You made them sign. I think Alan said that it was like maybe 100 pages. I can't remember. Don't quote me on 100 pages, but a lot of pages where you sign off that you're aware of all of this, whatever. I don't know what the document contained, but do they read them? I'm not sure. You could say there's also some responsibility on the people going there, but they're excited. They want to see the Titanic. They trust that you're doing things correctly. I bet there's a lot of jargon in those papers that they don't even understand. So I do think this is Stockton's fault, Stockton's ego that caused this to happen.
Stockton stated clearly how he likes to ruin a life.
OSHA.
And as you can imagine, a lawsuit is no easy thing, especially when you're being threatened with theft, fraud.
So what exactly did happen to Lockridge? His presence in the documentary doesn't end there. And if you watched the hearings, you'll have seen him testify. He actually filed with OSHA, the U.S.'s industrial health and safety regulator, blowing the whistle on OceanGate and how dangerous it was.
Unfortunately, whistleblowers, they're not protected from retaliation. We're not like the, witness protection program or something like that. What we do is investigate.
But one thing after another went wrong. OceanGate sued Lockridge for breach of contract and retaliation. And after spending all of he and his wife's savings trying to fight OceanGate in federal court, he was eventually forced to withdraw his complaint. He ran out of money, and the OSHA investigation put him on the back burner.
Please note that at this time I have 11 cases that are older than yours. I will be in contact with you as needed. Thank you for your patience.
The employees knew. It wasn't just David Lockridge and Tony Nissen who knew, with OceanGate, that something terrible was going to happen with Titan.
Stockton, he had said, we want you to be a female young pilot. We want you to be the face of the company.
Featured heavily in the documentary is Emily Hammermeister, who speaks on behalf of many other lower-level employees who all realized that something like this was going to happen with Titan. They bore witness to the test hole's failures. They heard the popping sounds, and many of them did raise their concerns with Rush, only to be dismissed.
I did speak up. A lot of people did. They discussed their concerns. They're like, what do you mean? This failed. You're going to keep going?
She and some others outright refused to bolt the sub closed going forward, which led to an ultimatum from Rush. Subsequently, many of those employees were fired or left, fearing the worst for OceanGate's passengers.
And I was not going to bolt anyone inside of that sub. And that was something that a lot of my coworkers at the time agreed on, and none of which stayed with the company much longer.
Winter in Newfoundland.
What we really wanted to do was
this was not an accident. This was not an accident.
Everett, and pull the insert and look at the inside of the hull to see if there were any cracks.
After Dive 80, the one that suffered a loud acoustic event that made Titan a ticking time bomb, winter rolled in, and operations had to cease for the season. But Stockton didn't want to pay to have Titan transported from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way back to OceanGate's headquarters in Washington, on the opposite side of North America. So he just left Titan sitting outside in a parking lot in Newfoundland for months, freezing and thawing over and over again in sub-zero temperatures.
Once we build this, it cannot be stored in sub-zero. It cannot go freezing.
Aside from this obviously making the hull even more fragile, it also prevented engineers from dismantling the sub to see what made the loud noise, so they couldn't repair or replace anything. It imploded on the very next dive.
If water gets in there, and you sit it out in freezing conditions and that water expands, it breaks fibers.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications.
Liability.
From the very first time I talked with people when the sub was still missing, there were sources who were saying to me they had left because of Stockton.
The Netflix documentary asks a valuable question that investigations have also been trying to determine. Is anybody other than Stockton Rush responsible for the Titan implosion?
There was one who actually wouldn't really fully open up to me until we all learned that Stockton had died.
Only the family of P.H. Nargelet have so far brought a lawsuit against him.
That's a French.
No criminal charges have been made.
The wrongful death suit seeks $50 million and claims those on board were terrified as they realized what was happening.
It's clear from the interviews that many of the people involved feel like they bear some responsibility. But equally, it seems like all decisions started and ended with Rush, and charges can't be filed against him because obviously he also perished in the implosion. It may take many more years for the investigations to be completed and to see the outcome of the lawsuit.
Everybody says, oh, it'll just be Stockton's wife. That's the only person you could be liable for. Nonsense. Those are the ones that are left with the aftermath. Those are the ones that are left to answer to the asset investigation team.
Let us know in the comments what you thought of Netflix.
Alright, yeah, it makes me angry to watch that Stockton's attitude throughout the entire thing. I mean, he just fired anyone that was telling him, for his own sake and for the innocent people's sakes, that there was something wrong with the Titan, and he just went through because he wanted some type of recognition. Well, now he got it. Not the one he wanted, but he has the recognition now. This is, yeah, like I said in the beginning, I don't think this was an accident. Yeah, I think you all saw it now. This was just a tragedy waiting to happen. And the sad part is that innocent people lost their lives because they trusted a man that had this attitude of being a visionary, but he was a fucking idiot. Sorry, I don't like cussing, but I mean, you murdered people. What do you want me to say? Anyway, I guess that is it for today's issue. For today's video. As usual, if there's anything you'd like me to react to next, please put it down in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. I'll see you next time. Bye.